By 1944, the United States Army had assembled one of the strangest military units in history. Officially, it was called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Unofficially, soldiers who served in it simply called themselves the Ghost Army. Their weapons weren't rifles or artillery. They were inflatable tanks, sound trucks, and a talent for theater. Their mission was to make the enemy see an army that wasn't there. The unit numbered roughly 1,100 men, a strikingly small force compared to conventional divisions. But its members were unconventional by design. The Army had recruited heavily from art schools, advertising agencies, and design studios. Among its ranks were future fashion designer Bill Blass, wildlife artist Arthur Shilstone, and photographer Art Kane. These men had been trained not for combat, but for deception. Sketching, sculpting, and staging illusions convincing enough to fool German aerial reconnaissance and forward observers. The Ghost Army operated through four main tools of trickery. The first was visual deception. Inflatable rubber tanks, trucks, artillery pieces, and even aircraft that could be pumped up in under 30 minutes and looked convincingly real from a distance or through a camera lens. Two soldiers could carry a deflated tank in a duffel bag, then inflate it into a decoy, weighing only a fraction of the real thing, but visually indistinguishable from the air. The second tool was sonic deception. Engineers from Bell Labs helped the unit record authentic sounds of tanks, trucks, and troop movements onto vinyl records, which were then played back through powerful amplifiers and speakers mounted on half-tracks. These broadcasts could be heard up to 15 miles away under the right conditions, convincing German listening posts that armored columns were rolling through areas where none actually existed. The third method was radio deception, sometimes called spoof radio. Signal Corps operators mimicked the radio traffic patterns of real Army units, using distinctive Morse code fists, the individual rhythm and style of an operator's keystrokes, to impersonate specific divisions. Since German intelligence tracked Allied units partly by monitoring these radio signatures, convincing fake traffic could suggest an entire division was massing in a location where, in reality, only a skeleton crew of Ghost Army soldiers stood. The fourth and final layer was atmospheric or theatrical deception. Soldiers would paint fake unit insignia on their jeeps, wear the shoulder patches of other divisions, and even stage loud, careless conversations in local cafes and towns, letting rumors and misinformation drift toward any listening ears, including potential spies. Military police would direct fake convoy traffic, complete with the correct unit markings, reinforcing the illusion for anyone watching. The Ghost Army's first major deployment came in Normandy, following the D-Day landings in June 1944, before expanding into a series of operations across France, Luxembourg, and Germany through early 1945. In total, the unit carried out more than 20 separate deception operations during the war, each requiring careful coordination with actual combat commanders to ensure the illusions matched real strategic goals. One of its most notable operations came in September 1944, near the town of Brest, France, where the unit staged deceptions to help mask troop movements during the Allied siege of the heavily fortified port. But perhaps the unit's most dangerous and significant mission came in the final months of the war, during Operation Viersen in March 1945. As Allied forces prepared to cross the Rhine River into Germany, the Ghost Army was tasked with disguising the true location of the crossing by the U.S. Ninth Army. Over several days, the unit impersonated two entire divisions, roughly 30,000 soldiers, using their inflatable vehicles, sound broadcasts, and fake radio traffic to suggest a river crossing miles away from where the real attack was actually planned. German artillery, apparently convinced by the ruse, shifted fire toward the decoy positions. The actual crossing, when it came, faced lighter resistance than commanders had feared, and the operation is often cited by military historians as one of the unit's most successful and consequential deceptions. This work was inherently dangerous. Despite specializing in illusion rather than direct combat, Ghost Army soldiers often operated close to the front lines, sometimes closer than conventional units, in order to make their broadcasts and displays convincing to nearby German forces. Roughly a dozen members of the unit were wounded or killed over the course of the war, a reminder that even a fake army faced very real risks. The unit's success depended on secrecy, layered upon secrecy. Not only were German forces meant to be fooled, but even most Allied soldiers had no idea the Ghost Army existed. Its operations were classified for decades after the war ended, and many veterans went home unable to discuss what they had actually done in Europe, similar in some ways to the silence maintained by codebreakers at Bletchley Park. For more than 40 years after World War II ended, the story of the Ghost Army remained buried in classified files. The unit's records were declassified only in 1996, and even then, public awareness grew slowly. It wasn't until documentaries, books, and renewed historical interest in the 2000s and 2010s that the full scope of the unit's contributions became widely known to the American public. Historians and military analysts who have studied the unit's operations generally credit it with helping to save thousands of Allied lives by diverting German attention, artillery, and troop concentrations away from real Allied objectives. Because deception is difficult to measure precisely, exact figures on lives saved are estimates rather than hard data. But the consistent judgment among military historians is that the unit's psychological and tactical impact was substantial relative to its tiny size. Recognition came remarkably late. It wasn't until 2022 that Congress passed legislation awarding the Ghost Army the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the nation's highest civilian honors, finally acknowledging publicly what the unit's roughly 1,100 members had accomplished nearly 80 years earlier. By that time, only a handful of veterans from the unit were still alive to receive the recognition in person. The Ghost Army's legacy extends beyond its immediate wartime impact. Its blend of artistic creativity and military strategy has since been studied by modern military and intelligence organizations interested in psychological operations, camouflage, and electronic deception, fields that have only grown in relevance in the age of digital warfare and misinformation. In many ways, the unit was ahead of its time, treating deception itself as a weapon every bit as vital as tanks or aircraft, one built not from steel, but from imagination, rubber, and sound.